What is going on at Man City Football Club? What has happened for them to go from record-breaking, treble-winning, 4-time consecutive Premier League winning team to what we're seeing this season? And in this video, I'm going to tell you exactly what has happened. Now, there have been a few theories that have been sort of chucked around over the last few months that I've seen, one of which is they're suffering from burnout, right? Where they've achieved their ultimate goal last season. They've done a treble. They've won the first Champions League ever in their club history, of course. And now they just can't get themselves revved up for it anymore. They're lacking in determination and that sort of wanting to get to the top of the hill mentality. They're suffering from champion syndrome, basically. And I think there's like a little bit to that theory, I guess, but the only thing I can counter that with is that the fact in previous seasons, the last 3, 4, 5, 6, however many seasons they've been at it, they've been winning consistently and not suffering that burnout, right? They're breaking records along the way. So although I do see, it was this big push for that first Champions League title where they'd come close before, not quite managed it. I do get that, but the way Pep Guardiola sets his team up, those players, the squad is constantly being added to, and also they're sort of shaving off the players they don't particularly need anymore that are maybe getting stagnant in the team, such as Zinchenko and Jesus, and now they're bringing in players like Marmoush and Savinho, this kind of thing. So they're kind of freshening the squad up. It's not, I don't think it's going to be burnout, that kind of thing. Another one is that Pep Guardiola can only manage top level teams, and as soon as things start getting a bit, as soon as they start becoming a struggle, or things aren't exactly smooth sailing, then he just sort of like moves on. I also don't particularly, I think that is true. Like you've never seen sort of Pep particularly manage his way through, average to below average teams and then earn his spot at this big team. It's been Bayern Munich, it's been Barcelona, it's been Man City, 3 of the best teams probably the world has ever seen. So Man City are no exception to that rule. They are an absolutely fantastic team, and they've got more money than, pretty much any other team in the world, maybe apart from, at this point, Newcastle, I think. But apart from that, yeah, they are a very, very good squad. And just this season, it is sort of the squad, and this is what the sort of premise of the video is going to be, is that it's kind of the squad, but also it shouldn't be that, basically. So I'll get into that. Now, my theory, and to be honest, the only one that actually makes any sense to me, so if you do get up to a point in this video where you've watched long enough to see what my theory is overall, and you don't agree with it, please let me know down below, because I don't understand how this has happened other than one thing and one thing only, and it sounds very oversimplistic, but I can't, like I said, I can't get my head around it any other way, is the absence of Rodri in that team, in that midfield. And I'm going to outline to you right now why exactly he, as one player, is so important for them, to the point where they've gone from treble winners to not even in the Champions League position at the moment. So I'm going to reel off some stats for you right now, which basically outline a two-sided statistic. One with Rodri in the team, and 2 is without Rodri in the team. So this will be since he's signed for the club, and not just this season and been missing, but any time he's missed in previous seasons through injury, that kind of thing. Okay, possession per game with Rodri 66%, without Rodri 60%. Win percentage with Rodri 74%, without Rodri 61%. Goals conceded per game with Rodri 0.74, without Rodri 1.42. Goals scored per game 2.3 with Rodri, 1.6 without Rodri. Big chances conceded per game 1.2 with Rodri, 4.3 without Rodri. Points per game 2.37 with Rodri, 1.9 without Rodri. Now that last one, if that trend continued throughout like a whole season, that's 15 points lost at the end of a full season, which is obviously in Rodri's absence, which I think is massive personally. So actually just last season, Rodri was the stat leader in the league for touches, carries, progressive passes, aerial duels, and clean sheet involvements. He also, over the last 5 seasons, has led the statistics in dispossessions per game. So the times he was dispossessed per game, which is 0.25. Now, if we can compare that to other similar players that play in a similar position, the closest one to that is Declan Rice on 0.45. Then you have players like Moises Caicedo, 0.53. You have Alexis McAllister, I think 0.56. Bruno Fernandes, 1.19. So Rodri's never basically gets tackled, which is, I mean, another incredible stat. So, I mean, most of those, I mean, are pretty incredible stats. I mean, if you think for just the impact one player has on a team that has been performing that well, and it seems a bit silly just to put all of that down to one player, and it isn't just all of that, right? There's exemptions. There's things like, you know, you see Erling Haaland is still scoring lots of goals without Rodri. They're still winning a good amount of games. They're 5th in the Premier League, which isn't terrible. It's just the standards they've set for themselves have been so very high. Now, I think they're something like 9 points off of Arsenal, who are just, you know, undisputed title challengers. No one's not calling them title challengers at the moment. People are saying, "Oh, Liverpool are going to win it," but you know, 9 points off the sort of pace of being in the title conversation. I mean, it isn't anything extreme. It's just the way in which they've gone about some of their losses. For example, losing 4-2 to PSG. Last night, losing 3-2 to Real Madrid, throwing games away. Was it PSV they drew 3-3 to, losing 4-0 to Spurs, 5-1 to Arsenal, 4-0 to Sporting Lisbon. It is the manner at which they're sort of I'd say crumbling is a little bit of a strong word, but it is strange. It is strange, and it's the fall off has been so significant and sort of sudden. There has to be some sort of, you know, catalyst for that to happen, right? And people say, oh, it's like burnout, and that they don't care as much anymore. They're not hungry enough anymore, and that kind of thing doesn't just go away straight away, right? And I've heard Gary Neville say that it happened to them when they won the treble, but they still had years of success after that, so right. So I know we've got a small sample size so far with Man City, but like I said, the drop off, the performances, the capitulations in the game have been quite significant, and the only thing that has fell off a cliff, like their stats and their performances, has been the complete absence of Rodri in the middle of the park there. Now, all those stats I just reeled off, fine, that, like, you know, stats, you can manipulate them however you want, and you can make them look good and make them look bad, whatever. They can be subjective depending on how you spin them. But if you just watch Man City's game, you can see the massive spaces in midfield. You can see the points at which where Rodri, if he was there playing, he would have sort of cut out whatever pass it was, or had positioned his team, his two midfielders in front of him in that 4-3-3 that they normally play correctly, so that these passing lanes would be cut out prior to any sort of big chances happening. Like I said, the big chances being conceded is one of the most glaring stats out there without Rodri being in the team. So the whole thing about Pep Guardiola as well, I don't think he's a bad manager. I think he has he's a bit of a silver spoon manager, right? I think you'd have to do a real bad job with the Barcelona team he had and the Bayern Munich team he had to not win the league every year, to not win the Champions League, you know, and have major success, because, you know, they're ridiculous teams. I do think, though, that he is not particularly well versed or well experienced in struggling and having to deal with lots of adversity, right? You see him in that Champions League game where he's got scratches all over his head, and he said, "Oh yeah, I did it to myself." I think that is a big sign of a man who isn't very good at dealing with losses and hardship and that kind of thing. Like I said, adversity. If you're scratching your face up like that, you know, over like a Champions League like group stage game, or whatever league stage it is now. That's pretty pathetic, I think, and that's quite indicative that he's getting quite exasperated with the whole thing. He doesn't quite know what to do, doesn't quite know how to remedy it. You know, you've seen him try different things, different players. He's experimented with the squad formations, starting lineups, and it just doesn't seem to be working at the moment. And I don't think he's the manager that they need really going forward. If they're going to have to sort of rebuild a little bit, and by that, and that's a loose term when I say rebuild, because they've still got, you know, all of this money, this incredible squad. It's just that I think when, for example, he's brought in players like Akanji, that they've just worked really well straight away, right? Whereas you think if Akanji had come in, you know, for another team, perhaps wouldn't have worked as well, right? So a lot of the signings, I think, and a lot of the tactics have been propped up by the presence of Rodri and his immense contribution to that team. So I mean, that is my reasoning behind it. I won't go into too much more detail, because I think the stats and the sort of the eye test when you watch Man City, it kind of speaks for itself. You know, if you sort of still aren't on board with this after listening to all this, if you have to this point, but by the way, if you have, thank you, then just, you know, go watch some highlights from like Man City games of last year, their like semi-final performance in the Champions League, their last sort of run of 10 or so games in the Premier League, games where Rodri was there present, and now go and watch highlights of a game from this year, any game. It could even be a win, right? It could even be a win. They're just not the same. There's so much space. They don't stifle their opponents. The pressing isn't working as well. It's not just defensively they're suffering, it's also in attack, because, you know, Rodri was so involved in the sort of preliminary stages of their attacks and their movements up the field, where that just doesn't seem to be sort of clicking at the moment, right? It's all starts from the spine of the team, and when you take out the middle, the strongest part of that spine, of course you're going to have problems. So that is it, basically. That is pretty much the video. So if you watched up to this point, like I said, thank you very much. I do appreciate that. If you enjoyed, you know, leave a like or a comment or something. If you disagree, whatever would be appreciated. Also, if you fancy this kind of thing, I'm going to try and do these kind of videos. I've got some already on the page. If you fancy going to check those out and you want to hit the subscribe button, that'd be awesome. But in any event, thank you very much for watching. Take it easy, and I'll see you in the next one.